Hello and welcome back to today's video. Now we're going to be looking into OPNSense and pfSense. This video specifically, we're going to be covering the install of OPNSense to our environment. Now I want to make a disclaimer here before, and I will add this to our pfSense video as well. Before we even get into it, we need to look into what is the difference between OPNSense and pfSense. First off, originally pfSense, was based off of hardened BSD. Now it seems that this has changed based on information I found here. I'm not exactly sure which update they did plan on doing this. This was my original assumption that this is why there's a difference and two different xSenses operating systems for your router. There's a bit of a discussion about it. Now, granted, it's from 4 years ago, and you know exactly what was happening, what was going on with the update, things like that. But for the most part, this the fork per se originally stems from some issues between how pfSense managed their development of the operating system compared to what OPNSense thought was best. Now, this is your opinion, however you see fit. If we take a look into, where is it? This is the old OPNSense domain that supposedly pfSense, or the parent company Netgate, owned. This was to make fun of them for whatever reason. Beyond me, but as you can see, it's a bit of a shitpost. They were not happy that OPNSense forked their code, and they kind of shit on them, for lack of a better term here. But they have the controversial video here. Wow, this is not snapping correctly. They have some previous quote-unquote features trying to make fun of the OPNSense fork, things like that, and whatever the hell this is supposed to mean, yeah, that. Additionally, they also announced pfSense Plus, which was, let's see here, 3 years ago. This was supposed to be a closed source edition fork of pfSense for more business enterprises compared to the regular pfSense. Now, it's been some time since I've actually gone back into pfSense, and I've read through the timelines and what's been going on. But regardless, I believe it is best to make this disclaimer here before we even start, especially if you are trying to make an assessment yourself. Which one do I want to run? Do I want to run OPNSense or do I want to run pfSense? Is this a home lab environment? Am I looking to run this in an enterprise environment, replacing some old routers? Whatever it may be. I mean, really, you can search it up and see for yourself. pfSense versus OPNSense. You can look all up here too. Oh, they're no longer Netgate. That's right. They're electric sheep fencing. That name makes no sense. But point being, before you even jump in, decide you're going to install something, you should get an understanding of what it's like, how it operates, what's the community behind it, especially if you're going to be paying for the enterprise support that both of these companies do offer. And then going forward. So, all right. And here we are ready to install OPNSense. Now, to get started, we'll want a few different specs for the machine. This can be a physical machine or it can be a VM like you see here. First off, the requirement in order to actually use this like a firewall is you're going to need two different interfaces. The first interface will be your WAN interface, and this will be where you get your internet from. And then the second interface will be a trusted zone known as the LAN interface. Now, these can be in either order because we'll reassign this once it gets set up. Either which way, it doesn't matter. And then you'll want to have a sufficient hard drive. Usually you can get away with something as small as 8 gigs. I'd typically go with the default Proxmox size of 32 gigs. This will depend how much you think you're going to log, how many of the features are you actually going to use out of OPNSense, and what exactly are you going to be storing. Realistically, it is a firewall, so you may not be storing much, but you'll have to think logging of approves and denies when it comes to the firewall. If you're logging Suricata events, the configuration's all for that. If you want to go as far as using something like Squid for the web proxying and you want to cache all that information, going from there. And then, of course, attach the ISO image of your OPNSense router, which you can find if you're doing the legacy version like we are. We're not booting via UEFI. So you can do AMD 64, DVD, choose your media location, download, extract it, and attach it to Proxmox using that ISO image. And then all the default information from here, legacy C BIOS. And then we're doing a 4-core CPU system because we'll want the additional power to be able to conduct sufficient amount of bandwidth through the firewall. This will change. The lower you have your CPU counts or the older the CPU is, the less likely you are to be able to push the bandwidth through. Additionally, with that, especially if you plan on using something like Suricata as an IDS IPS system, this will also hinder a lot of your speeds depending on the processor and that core type that you're using. And then with that as well, the RAM or the memory, you're going to need a good amount as well, depending on what you're doing. I've gotten away with something as small as 512 megabytes, but I typically like to do anywhere between 1 to 2 up to 4 gigabytes, depending on what I am doing with the router. And this is more because I do use Suricata for all my internet-facing OPNSense nodes. So for this instance, we'll be doing 2 gigs, 4 cores, and then all the configuration you can see here. Once we are ready to go, we'll go ahead and start this up. It'll go through its regular prompt, auto start into multi-user mode. And this will take a quick minute, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here, and we'll come back to it once it's fully started up. Okay, now that our OPNSense system has fully started up, because we are not going to recover any sort of configuration, we're starting from scratch, we're going to go ahead and use the installer login. So installer for the username, and then OPNSense all lowercase with password, default key map. And then from here, this is purely out of your preference, what you see fit. If you think you're going to use a lot of storage, you can use ZFS. Otherwise, UFS usually does the trick. Either which way, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. I personally have used quite a few instances of OPNSense. Both file system formats do perfectly well for me. ZFS I use more on my big data systems. The Synology, for example, uses ZFS, I believe. I've used TrueNAS before where I've used ZFS, but for my smaller systems, I think UFS is just much more simpler. And that's my personal preference. It's nothing that you need to do in either which way. So we'll just go ahead, we'll do install via UFS. And then we're going to choose a target, which will be DA0, where our hard disk is, 32 gigs. Continue with the recommended swap partition of 8 gigs, sure. Last chance, are you sure you want to destroy the current content? Yes, there's nothing on them. So from here, it will go ahead, write everything to the hard drive, and prepare it for OPNSense. This will take some additional time, so we'll give it here a second, and it should come back up. Okay, now OPNSense has been completed. We're going to go ahead and change the root password for security. We're going to set it to very secure. See if it lets us this time. Windows didn't like it when we did this. So, password. Oh, I have to type it correct first. Password. Okay, it's complete. So now we're going to go ahead and complete the install by exiting and rebooting. And it's going to first give us the IP address, which we will not be able to access, and I'll show you guys here why in a minute. Okay, now everything is online and set up. We're going to go ahead and log into OPNSense and correct the first problem. So if we log in with root and then the password we set earlier, password, you can see WAN does not have a IP address currently configured to it. And here's the reason why. If we hit 1 to assign interfaces, no lags, no VLANs, VTNet 0 is AE and VTNet 1 is for A. So let's go take a look real quick. This one, net 0, is currently our WAN interface. AE should be designated as WAN, so if we go back, and AE should be WAN, so VTNet 0 should actually be the WAN. So with that, we're going to go ahead and enter the WAN interface name VTNet 0 and the LAN interface name of VTNet 1. Once we're done, we'll just hit enter because we have no other optional interfaces, and hit Y to proceed and save those changes. It should automatically grab an IP address from the WAN interface, comes up a little quicker. It'll restart some of those services, and as you can see there, it grabbed one of our WAN interface IP addresses, the one from our management interface, and then it's routing traffic through from the LAN interface of 192.168.1.1 in a 24 subnet 255.255.255.0. So now that that's been configured, we're going to change over our VMs here real quick over to this new interface. That way our Windows VMs are able to be in their own isolated space. So I'll go change those in the back end, and then we'll come right back to this. Okay, going into our client here, as you can see, it looks like it picked up a new IP address automatically without our intervention. But just in case, we are going to run a quick command. We go cmd, and then ipconfig release. And then we're going to flush the DNS, and finally ipconfig renew. Oh, I might want to spell it right. Okay. And bringing that back up. Okay, we get 192.168.1.102 with our default gateway of 192.168.1.1, which we want to keep in mind. If we go over to our browser here, now if we do 192.168.1.1, should bring us to the OPNSense gateway. Okay, and you'll get a connection something like this, basically saying that the connection you're making is to an HTTPS server, and the certificate has been signed by itself, basically, which completely invalidates the need for certs for the most part. But in this case, we can trust it because going back here, I mean, it's OPNSense, right? Nothing really bad is going to happen. So we'll go advanced, continue. And then like we did before, same username and password, root and password. Once again, if I can type. There we go. And there we are. Let's go ahead and full screen this. We'll go next. We'll choose hostname, YT, sandbox gateway. This can be any hostname you choose. And then nerdherd.internal, similar to our Active Directory domain. Once again, you can choose any domain you want. This is specifically for your network and how you'll basically connect to other devices if you do choose to use the domain name. For example, we could get to this gateway by doing ytsandboxgateway.nerdherd.internal and reach the same page we're at. Our primary DNS server, we'll do quad 9. And our secondary we'll leave with Cloudflare. And we'll allow the DNS to be overridden by DHCP. For privacy reasons, you may want this disabled if you're using this on your own network with the WAN interface actually reaching your ISP. This means that your ISP could override your DNS results. And given in the past, places or ISPs like Comcast and such, they like to sell that information and then provide a bit of a little extra penny to them. So in my opinion, I would personally not allow the override of DNS and then move on from there. Use your own DNS, whether it's Technidium, whether you want to use Quad 9. I personally prefer Quad 9 if I do need to use an external service, and then move on from there. So for this, I'm going to keep it on for our sandbox environment, since I believe this is going to override to our Technidium server outside the current sandbox network anyways. And we'll enable the DNS resolver. No DNS support, and we're not hardening the data just yet. We'll get into that in another clip. And we'll keep the time server hosting, same time zone. And then the WAN interface will be DHCP, since our FortiGate will provide an IP address automatically. We don't need to provide a MAC address, a custom MTU, or MSS clamp. None of this stuff really needs to be configured. Configure this to your ISP settings how you see fit. If you're doing a similar sandbox environment like mine, where essentially you're going to be double natting, it should pertain essentially to that same network, just like setting up an AOL client, really. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Won't modify any of those. We'll keep the same LAN IP interface. Make sure this does not overlap any other interfaces on your network. If, for example, we use the 10.0.0.0/24 subnet and network. If we do the same thing here in our LAN IP address, this is going to throw routing off. The FortiGate is going to get confused, and then everyone's going to have a terrible time. You're not going to be able to route, you're not going to be able to access the internet, and you're probably going to have to reboot a bunch of network devices after separating the problematic child, this being OPNSense. So we'll keep this as is, because this doesn't overlap with any other subnet in our network, with a subnet mask of 24. So basically any device from 192.168.1.1 up to 192.168.1.254.255 being that broadcast. We'll hit next, root password will keep the same, and reload finally. It'll reload all the configuration changes you've just made, apply them to the firewall, and from there, OPNSense will be ready to go. So now that OPNSense has been configured, we'll be ready to now use it for the basic internet access, but we'll need to configure additionally if we want to use services like HTTP, HTTPS outbound, essentially if we're hosting websites, if we're hosting Minecraft servers, things like that, this will need to be additionally configured within OPNSense. We'll cover this in a next video, so stay tuned and make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to stay on topic with any of my other updates, me shit posting on Twitter, things of that nature. Be sure to check out the link tree down below where I not only have my Twitter, my Discord, and my Telegram, but also me and my friends messing around on the webs. So thank you guys for watching, and hope you have a good one. Any questions, comments, concerns below, leave them in the comments down below, and I will be sure to respond back to you as soon as possible and provide you with the help you may need. So thank you for watching, and have a good one.